Good morning, St. Francis. Good morning, people of God. It is Friday, the 13th of June, 2025, Friday of the 10th week of the year, the 10th week in Ordinary Time. And although it may be Friday the 13th, it is not a sad, scary day because it is also the memorial today of St. Anthony of Padua, again, the great Franciscan scholar who, when asking St. Francis if he might teach the friars to be able to know something about theology before they go out to preach, which is always a very good thing to do, St. Francis replied, go ahead and do it, but don't do it in such a way to extinguish the power of prayer and devotion in their lives, which is always true. Because again, we don't tend to look at theology as just an academic subject to gain more and more knowledge and therefore become smarter and smarter people. We gain it so that it can be put to practical use. And how does the practical element of what it is that we learn, what it is that we study, help us to understand not just ourselves, but this world around us that God has given us, through which God shows us the many wonders of God's beauty and God's love for us. So again, important Franciscan perspective that's kind of placed upon education, that here, even at St. Francis, at the Franciscan school, and even in the preschool, we try to make as a hallmark, of what it is that we do and what we try to accomplish. It isn't just learning to rise above each other and to become more powerful and become more influential and become more whatever. It's so that, again, we can recognize within this world the many ways in which God speaks to us and continues to speak to us, never stops speaking to us, and to be able to listen and understand just what it is that God is trying to tell us, so our lives may be full and rich and healthy, and given the life that our lives need to manifest to the world the power and the wonder and the glory of God. So with that in mind, we have readings that are special for St. Anthony, which could be used for him. But if you have a Franciscan lectionary, you kind of need them. The thing is, though, our readings for the day are not so great in trying to emphasize these kinds of things. Actually, the first reading from 2 Corinthians, is pretty good because, again, it talks about the demeanor of a person who believes in this world, that although they are beaten down, they do not despair. Although they are threatened, they still contain courage. Although they are, misrepresented, whatever it is, they don't doubt the truth of the message they're trying to give. That they are not, that we who believe are not lost and alone. That is, that Christ who accompanies us, and even the pains that we experience, again, are likened to, again, the dying of Christ, and again, the crucifixion of Christ. And the thing about it is, how does God deal with that? Is not by just letting Christ suffer and find pain and sorrow, but by also rising, again, bringing Christ back, to life, and a life that is new and different. So it is, again, it's like, how do we understand the fact that our faith is not a bubble that enwraps us and allows us to kind of, live a wonderful life just with those we want to live with, or who think the same that we do, but that our faith puts us out there, and it may differ quite dramatically from the rest of the world, understands things. The way in which God each gives us faith may also differ drastically from the way that even our church wants to understand it. And so, again, in knowing all of these things, if we know that what we're doing is true, if we know that what we're doing is giving life, then we need to hold on to that we need to remember that in the midst of everything else. Even though there may be people who turn against us, maybe people who do not like what it is that we say and who constantly are berating us for what it is that we're doing wrong, it is the fact that the truth of our message nevertheless remains, because we can see the joy and the wonder and the life and the hope, that it gives, to others. And so it's important to remember that always. But the gospel today from Matthew is not a good gospel at all, because, again, Jesus is continuing, this idea about righteousness and wanting people who want to be more righteous than each other and what have you. Well, again, Jesus then goes to the extremes, and this is, again, his preaching by extreme. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your hand causes you to sin, then cut it off, because you don't want to go into hell with an eye that was sinful or a hand that was sinful. Okay, again, a dramatic, drastic way of dealing with sorts of things. But then he goes into divorce. And why is he going into divorce? Because he lives in a time in which people didn't respect each other, when people did not care, about each other. And so they used each other many ways. And so, and it was always, there were all these loopholes in the divorce mechanisms within Judaism, or even within ancient Rome, in which it could be easily done, but then by leaving the woman in the party destitute, because she she could not go back to her home, and she could have no way to support herself. And so Jesus basically says, if you look even lustfully, at a woman, you've committed, or if you divorce a woman or look lustfully at somebody, you're committing sin and all kinds of things like that. And if you marry again, after divorcing, that's also a sin, because that's what people would do. They would throw a woman aside and pick somebody better. It's like, it happens here, it happens today, but it doesn't mean, again, that anybody who is divorced is sinning. Anybody who has found divorce has failed. Marriages will end. Love can be misunderstood. Love can be, thought to be one thing at one time and all of a sudden becomes something else. We are human beings. There are never guarantees that how we begin is how we end up. We need to be respectful of that. We need to try to understand that. Again, Pope Francis was all about trying to understand this better. And again, a church that did not like what he had to say, again, kept shooting this down. But his truth remained. What about the care for those involved in this? To stay in a loveless marriage, stay in a marriage that produces harm and hurt, is not a marriage at all. But again, knowing again that when we decide again to end something, we do it, conscious of the care, that needs to remain for each other, that needs to continue in our lives, that needs to show again that our hearts are still open to the possibility, of compassion and beauty and wonder. A blessed day, St. Francis and people of God. May the Lord give you his peace.